So, okay, this is decoding the Black Panther myth and the movie, Straight No Chaser. And the reason why I'm making a distinction between the myth and the movie is because the myth or the comic book reality of Black Panther, the Black Panther character, preceded the movie. Okay? So many people, as they look at this to garner meaning, are just looking at it from the perspective of the movie alone. And the vast majority of people are not educated or not aware of the entire Black Panther mythos uh, and the comic book reality that it was created in. So, uh, as I look at uh, people and hear their reactions to the movie, and again, everybody is going to have an opinion. Everybody is going to have a perspective based on their level of consciousness and knowledge. And I'm not here to belittle anyone's take on the movie. Again, you have to see it from your own perspective, and we cannot expect everyone to see the same thing. Uh, no matter how you came out of the movie and what you saw or didn't see, it was all based on your particular perception. What we're here to do is to do a thorough um, examination as well as a decoding of the symbols that were in the movie and look at it not only from, again, a prophetic standpoint, the prophetic blueprint and framework that our ancestors gave us, but also from the standpoint of the full mythology of the Black Panther myth, the full understanding and the full context, rather, of the mythology of the myth. Because if you don't understand that, you can leave out making false uh, assumptions and conclusions, which, by the way, many people have done because they have not understood the myth, and they will fail to really understand the power and energy that this film is generating. And that's what I want to focus on, because I want us to tap into this power and this energy. This, this thing has gotten, it has taken on a life of its own, and we can all benefit from that power. There are a lot of statements that are being made. Well, ain't no money coming in your pocket, or hey, it's just a movie, or this is just a comic book tale. Look, it is much more than that. And again, as we see the effect that it is having worldwide, this thing is breaking records. And we understand this from a metaphysical standpoint, from an energetic standpoint. We should understand where attention goes, energy flows. So, from that standpoint, we must pay attention to this, because this is a tremendous source of energy, a tremendous buildup of energy. And as cosmic beings, we can indeed tap into it. But we must understand it's just like aligning ourselves with a vibratory frequency or a radio frequency. On your if you recall, we used to have these transistor radios way back, and you would have to calibrate uh, that station and tune in very carefully to the station that you wanted to listen to, in order to for that signal to come in strong and for you to connect with that wave frequency. Well, it's the same thing with anything energetic. And again, this has generated and is generating a tremendous amount of energy. So, what we're here to do tonight is not to, again, belittle anyone else's take on the movie. But what I want, my interest is to get you all to tap into this tremendous energy buildup, this tremendous energy vortex and flow that is surrounding this. So we're going to be taking a look at this on uh, from a metaphysical standpoint. That being said, throughout the scriptures, from the book of Genesis to the book of Malachi, a general and consistent theme is that of the dynamic interaction or interplay between siblings, brothers, and most specifically twins. Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob being the most notable examples of this type. So in the movie, just to connect it, there was the general theme was this dynamic interplay or interaction, not between brothers, not between twins specifically, but between cousins, between T'Challa, the Black Panther, and the caricature or the character that was called, referred to as Killmonger. All right. But it is the same basic theme. And these two characters that we're going to be focusing on, T'Challa, the Black Panther, and Killmonger, we must understand they represent two types of a single thing, or two aspects of a single thing. All right? We must keep this idea of singularity and wholeness at the forefront, because we tend to lose it in the narrative, especially when it comes to a comic book story or a dramatic film, or even in this case, an action film. But it is the same theme, the same general theme that is found in the Bible from the book of Genesis to the book of Malachi. This interplay between two types, two brothers, two siblings, all right? And especially two twins. Again, Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob being the most notable examples of this type. And so it goes again that T'Challa and Killmonger are a modern day representation of this dynamic interaction and interplay between so-called siblings. And the siblings, as in the case of Cain and Abel, Esau and Jacob, represent, respectively, Cain and Esau represent recessive traits of melanin and of genes. Abel and Jacob represent the dominant aspects of of melanin and genes. All right. Now, it's a little bit different with T'Challa and Killmonger. They represent two types as well, but it does not have to do with dominant and recessive type genes. It is a step up in the development of the mythos and the allegory. And we're going to take a closer look at that. So, in the book of Genesis, the 25th chapter, from the 21st to the 26th verse, it talks about the birth of, again, these two distinct types, namely Esau, the older of the two twins, and Jacob, the younger of the two twins. And in the 25th and the 26th verse, it states that the first came out red. That is Esau, or Edom, or Adam earlier, in the book of Genesis, meaning red, representing the flawed recessive traits. He was red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And later we find out that they called him Edom, again, which is related to Adam, meaning red. And after that, his brother his brother out. That's Jacob, representing the dominant traits. And his hand took a hold of his brother Esau's heel. So again, we see this dynamic interaction or interplay between siblings or brothers, specifically twins in the Bible. However, when we arrive at the so-called New Testament, particularly the book of Revelation, this rather fixed thematic premise drastically changes. First, with the birth of Jesus in the New Testament, which represents, remember, this is all allegory. This is not representative of actual historic figures. It's all allegory. The birth of Jesus, the Son, a singular Son, not twins in this case, representing the birth of one whole healed Son. I'm going to say that again. The birth of Jesus in the New Testament represents not an actual birth of a historic figure, but a type. Jesus representing the singular Son, or the birth of one whole healed Son. And then in the 12th chapter of the book of Revelation, it reads, "And there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. And she being with child," now again, that is a singular child, not with twins in this case, "a singular child, cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon." Now understand that the dragon is red like Esau. Are you all with me? A great red dragon. The scriptures, the symbolism, the colors, giving you clues as to this character, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and 7 crowns upon his head. And his tail drew a third of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, to do what? Devour her child as soon as it was born. Now, again, we see this enmity between the seed of the woman and it says dragon here, but the word is serpent. The word is serpent, and I'll parenthetically put it down. It is the seed of the serpent, or represented as the seed of the serpent. Esau being the seed, and Cain being the seed of the serpent. Abel and Jacob being the seed of the woman. And again, this symbolism of a woman delivering a child is consistent not only in the book of Revelation, but in the book of the Gospels, rather, in the birth of Jesus. Jesus being the seed of Mary, all right, not of Joseph. This is the virgin birth. All of this is significant as we take a look at the Black Panther mythos and the movie. All of this is going to come into play and be significant and help us in identifying the 2 types that are represented in the movie by T'Challa, the Black Panther, and Killmonger, who is the golden jaguar in the comic book mythos. So, his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and did cast them to the earth. And the dragon, the red dragon, or the red serpent, stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. And she brought forth a man child who was to rule the nations with a rod of iron. I'm going to emphasize this. Not with a feather, all right? Not with a book of administrative laws, not with uh, a wreath that stands for peace, but a rod of iron. He was to rule with a rod of iron. All right? Remember this. And her child was caught up to the throne of God, up to God and to his throne. So, beginning the introduction. The problem, again, with us identifying correctly our symbols and correctly interpreting and decoding these mythic narratives has to do with our indoctrination, especially within the West. It has specifically to do with our programming and indoctrination in the West. Isaiah 9, verses 13 through 16, for the people turneth not unto him that smiteth them, neither do they seek the Lord of hosts. Therefore the Lord will cut off from Israel head and tail, branch and rush in one day. The ancient and honorable, he is the head, and the prophet that teacheth lies, he is the tail. For the leaders of this people cause them to err. Historically, that is our story. That the individuals that have been over us have given us an erroneous account of our true and verifiable history. So we struggle when it comes to looking at powerful movies and powerful myths like we've all witnessed currently with Black Panther. Isaiah 30. Now go write it before them in a table and note it in a book, that it may be for the time to come forever and ever. We are currently in the time to come being referred to here. Again, setting the proper prophetic blueprint laid down to us and given to us by our divine ancestors. That this is a rebellious people, referring to us, lying children, children that will not hear the law of the Lord, which say to the seers, see not, and to prophets, prophecy not unto us right things, speak unto us smooth things, prophesy deceits. And we have a tendency, because of our programming, because of our entrainment, to not look at things from the proper perspective and with the proper eyesight and insight. We are used to smooth things, things that make us feel good, things that stroke our ego. So we have a tendency to what? Gravitate toward those things. And the things that we deem as unpleasant based on our programming and entrainment, we tend to ignore those things or to play them down or to put them in a certain category. And this is a very deceptive, self-deceptive practice. Jeremiah 8 and 5. Why then is this people of Jerusalem slidden back by a perpetual backsliding? They hold fast to deceit. They refuse to return. That speaks for itself. Also, Jeremiah 16:9. O Lord, my strength and my fortress and my refuge in the day of affliction. The Gentiles, that is, Negroes, shall come unto thee from the ends of the earth. The West, from the perspective of the East, the Western Hemisphere is the end of the earth. This is very, very important because I started out saying that we are most affected in the West by this. The individuals that have grown up in the West and have come in the West, they've been programmed in a certain way. And we have been programmed not to see our signs, not to recognize our own history when it is being displayed in front of us. And when we do sort of recognize it, we can't make heads nor tail of it. Again, because of that entrainment, because of that programming. The Gentiles, that is the Negroes, shall come unto thee from the end of the earth, from the west, and shall say, surely our fathers have inherited lies, vanity, and things wherein there is no profit. So this sets the broad prophetic timeline, what we've just gone through, to our beginning to decode T'Challa and Killmonger in their relationship in the Black Panther myth as well as the movie. I'm assuming that everyone on the line has at least seen the movie, but most of us are not familiar with the myth. So again, tonight we are going to talk about the movie, but since the myth sets the framework for the movie, we're going to also include aspects of the myth, and not only just the myth of the Black Panther comic book series, but talk about the history of comic books in general and how that is, as our indigenous American ancestors call, powerful, powerful medicine. It is powerful, powerful medicine. I was really taken aback and kind of discouraged a little bit when I saw people on social media saying, wow, this is only a movie. And it was pro and con, because when people would get on there and give their opinions about the, actual science that underlies the movie, people on both sides that really enjoyed the movie and just enjoyed it for a comment, they didn't see, the significance of viewing it as anything other than a comic book, a movie, a source of entertainment. But we're going to find out that nothing is that simple in this world, and that we are not in a post-oppression period. We are not. We are still the targets every day, all day, of oppression from our enemies. And so nothing is just a movie. Nothing is just this or just that. Almost everything has significance. And we have to be educated whenever possible on the wiles of our enemy and our oppressor. We are not in a post-racial, post-oppression world yet. And we would be naive and we would be gullible to think that something with this sort of impact, this sort of worldwide attention, is just a movie and just entertainment. That wouldn't be wise to think that. So, T'Challa represents the Eastern man, and Killmonger represents the Western man. Now, why do I have it represented T'Challa in blue and Killmonger in green? Because we're going to find out that all hero epics have to do with the prototypical template, which is the Osirian myth, the myth of Osiris, or the tale of Osiris. In the East, he is represented with a blue face. In the West, Osiris in the West, he is represented with a green face. All of our ancient ancestors knew that the prophetic narrative, the broad prophetic narrative of our journey, of the hero's journey or the Heru's journey, we'll get to that later, would start in the East and it will be culminated in the West, where the sun sets. The East is where the sun, the S-U-N and the S-O-N rises, and the same S-U-N, S-O-N sets in the West. So we have the one sun, T'Challa, in the East, representing the Eastern man, or Osiris in the East, with the blue face. Killmonger represents the setting sun, or Osiris, in the West. And according to the prophetic tale, our salvation is going to be established and come not from the East, but from the West. The final chapter is going to be written in the West. In the West. So the East, represented in the movie by the nation of Wakanda and its king, its leader, T'Challa, represents specifically melaninated peoples, that is the virgin mother Africa, because remember, Wakanda had never been colonized, had never been conquered, and was kept hidden. Everyone on the outside thought it was just a poor nation of what? Goat herders and farmers. But when the glamour was lifted and you pierced through the veil, it was an ultra super scientific, highly advanced civilization. So Wakanda represents Virgin Mother Africa in its pure, chaste infancy, never been touched, never been colonized. And Mother Africa represents the divine feminine aspect of melanin, untouched by the colonizer. Killmonger represented, again, Osiris in the West, in America. And I shouldn't put America down there. I should have put Amexa down there, because that is the ancient name of America, as we'll see. He represents melaninated peoples, that is, the ones that were violated, the aspect of the violated or raped Mother Africa, the violated divine feminine, as adversely affected by the colonizer, using the movie's most popular term, or one of the most popular terms. So we see an ancient map of what is called East Amexem, that is Africa and the lands to the east on the eastern hemisphere, and Western or West Amexa, which is the North American continent, including Canada, all right, North, South, and Central Americas, and the islands that belong to them, as well as the islands on the eastern side as well. So there was no idea in ancient society of two different things. It was Eastern Amexa and Western Amexa, just like it was uh, the uh, kingdom of Judah and Israel in the Levant or the Holy Lands, upper kingdom of Kemet and the lower kingdom of Kemet, East and West Germany, North and South, in the Civil War in America, etc., and so on. All right. So it was a united idea in the ancient world, especially. And again, T'Challa and Killmonger represent two aspects of the same thing, just as the Eastern Empire of Amexem and the Western Empire of Amexem. The only separation was the water at that time, the ocean at that time, but they were still represented two aspects of one thing. We clear? So we have to keep this in mind in order for us to properly and accurately conceptualize the Western influence. All right? The one thing that you did not see in the movie, you saw uh, T'Challa's father kill his brother, Killmonger's father. All right? The one thing that they did not show was Killmonger's mother ever in the movie. She was hidden. And from an allegorical standpoint, from a metaphysical standpoint, one must, when properly decoding something, not just pay attention to the things that are there and presented, but to pay close attention to things that are not there. That is an aspect of melanin. We, as melaninated people, when we dance to a beat, we don't try to dance to every note. We dance to the spaces and we move to the spaces between the notes. And we fill those spaces in between with movement. And that's why we look so cool when we dance, because we can improvise in a number of different ways between those notes, where there is an absence of sound. Are you all with me? So again, we must pay attention then as a quality of melanin to the things that are not presented. And what was not presented ever, you did not see Killmonger's mother. You saw his father and you saw him. But when his father died, you got to ask who raised him. He didn't raise himself. He was just a little 8, 9-year-old kid out there playing basketball. So what you didn't see was his influence in the West. And the primary and very first programmer of sons and daughters is the mother. And we understand what our mothers, our female elders and ancestors went through for us. Remember, we taught about the faithful and voluntary free will sacrifice of the sisterhood of the divine feminine and the cosmic historic bending of the knee, and how they volunteered because of this flaw genetically that was in our people, this reoccurrence of the recessive qualities and traits that these divine cosmic individuals volunteered freely of their own will to emanate into the physical realms and into history at this time to perform this alchemical process. And they knew that for a while, what they did would adversely affect their children. All right? They knew that their natures would be reversed. Nature had provided for this type of balance. We reverse the nature by burning and pulling a civilized nigger apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone, unprotected, the male image destroyed, just like Killmonger's mother represented being alone, the male, her husband, Killmonger's father, being destroyed. The ordeal caused her to move from her psychologically dependent state to a frozen independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her female offspring in reverse roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent. Let me ask you a question. Did Killmonger exhibit the characteristics of somebody that was mentally weak and dependent? Rhetorical question, keep it in mind, but physically strong. Because she has become psychologically independent, she will train her female offspring to be psychologically independent. So what do we have? So what have you got, rather? You've got the nigger woman out front and the nigger man behind and scared. Question number 2. Did Killmonger appear at all in the movie to be a nigger that was behind and scared? Rhetorical question. Keep it in mind. Killmonger represented the seed of woman that was ritualistically healed in the West. The seed of woman, or the whole child, the healed child that was ritualistically healed in the West. This is according to the Osirian. It follows very closely of the Osirian myth. Remember, ritual scarification and branding equaled the voluntary physical trauma as a corrective healing procedure. And this is why you see Killmonger that had the scarification, marks of scarification and branding, indicating that he was healed in the West, according to what? The prophetic blueprint of our ancient ancestors. So, like it or not, no matter what your opinion was or is on Killmonger, he represents the promised, planned, and anticipated whole, healed seed of woman in the movie. The one that would come forth to rule, not with a feather, not with an olive branch, but with a rod of iron. I know that flies in the face of most of our religious training, in training, and programming. But this series that we're going to do on the Black Panther myth and movie today is going to prove that. And we're going to show that it follows precisely the prophetic blueprint, framework, and timeline. And from the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven suffereth violence, and the violent take it by force. That's what Killmonger represented. That energy, that destructive energy that would arise to what? Cause an end to oppression and the oppressor and the oppressive system. You don't do that by negotiating. You don't do that with an olive branch. And again, we're not advocating gun violence. The weapons that Killmonger was what wanted to use from Wakanda were made of vibranium, and vibranium is an externalization of melanin. That's all it is. It is just weaponized melanin. We're not advocating anyone picking up an assault rifle or a sword or anything like that. We're just talking about the energetic nature that is going to be present, that is present in the last days. And that energy is what we must align ourselves to. It is not generative or creative. It is not operative or substantive. It is profoundly destructive. And this is what Killmonger represented. And when T'Challa, the other aspect of his personality, asked him, "What do you want?" He said, "I want the throne." And the throne, when have you ever seen a throne or rulership negotiated? Game recognizes game, and power recognizes greater power and will only cede to greater power. The power that we have in us, innate in us, that internal neural melanin in its activated state is the most devastating power in the universe. There will be a time of olive branches and administration, but only after this destructive power represented by our ancient ancestors. We're going to get to that in the next session. Only until after they have arisen and done their job. And these are the energies that we must prepare to align with and calibrate with. I know that we have not been programmed like that. We have been miseducated to think that divinity only has to do with building up and not tearing down. Let's go to Ecclesiastes 3. We have to recognize that there is a season, a time, and a purpose for everything. There's a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, and a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, and a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love, and a time to hate, a time of war, and a time of peace. We are right at the end. This is a time of war. Our oppressor has been engaged since he has had dominion in a campaign of genocidal war against us. And all the while throughout our history, we've been in a mode of what? Negotiation, trying to negotiate with an aberrant, demented, genocidal mind. Killmonger was the right answer in the right season, and he is our right answer in the right season. Negotiation and diplomacy and that sort of thing will come later. But first, we must get the oppressor's foot off of our neck. And again, I'm not advocating fighting with conventional weapons. We must tap into this combative, destructive energy that is manifesting itself now. Jesus in the gospel said, I have come not for peace, but with a sword. And we have to understand what time it is. It is not time to try to hold hands, and it's never been time to try to hold hands with your enemies and sing kumbaya, and we shall overcome. This is the time of overcoming with the power that is resonant in you. No one is going to come and do it for you. This energy that we are talking about that is ascending at this time is the energy that is represented by our ancient ancestors. And trust me, they are not like us. Your oppressor knows this and is counting on you not to know it, and wants to keep you mentally in the mental state of negotiation, where he has no intentions ever of negotiating with you. Think of the indigenous peoples around the planet that has encountered this oppressive, genocidal maniac. Has he keeping any treaty? Let's just focus on the Americas in the West. Did he keep any treaty that he made with our ancient indigenous ancestors in the West? Or did he break every treaty that they negotiated? How many people's ancestors got their 40 acres and a mule? Anybody? Anybody on the call?
None of us have.
Oppressive, genocidal power has never ceded to negotiation. But this is what our fathers, these are the lies that our fathers in the West have taught us, that you negotiate with someone that is trying to murder you, that is trying to wipe you out and cause your extinction. T'Challa, the Black Panther, represents Martin Luther King. If we want to put a recent historic make a recent historic syncretism or comparison. And Killmonger represents Malcolm X, a warrior spirit that advocated what? No negotiation, separation. Martin Luther King advocated what? Integration. And if you recall, this is history now. If you recall, they were close to winning the victory in terms of getting the laws passed and amended, the Constitution amended. And he was sitting in the hotel room with Andrew Young. And Andrew Young looked over them, and they were so close to victory. He said, what's wrong with you? Why are you so sad and pensive? And Martin Luther King reflected and said, I believe that we are integrating into what? A burning house. This oppressor will never concede power voluntarily. He is not afraid of you marching. Neither is he afraid of you rioting and picking up guns. What he is terrified of is you, me, us activating this power that is within us, that he refers to as occult power or black magic, because he knows that that will end his destruction. We are to use that power at this time, again, not as an olive branch, but as a sword, as a rod of iron, as a stone that is cast. You all got to hear me. We have to cease from this touchy-feely, romanticized version of spirituality and put on our armor and take what is rightfully our inheritance, and that is this whole earth. Do you think that we are going to negotiate and barter for rulership of the entire planet, which belongs to us? No, will never happen. We must stop being so gullible and naive and clinging to those things that are deceitful, that are lies, and that are not profitable, have never been profitable for us. What have we ever gotten that is worth anything through negotiation, besides to sit at the same lunch counter and use the same toilet and drink from the same fountain as your enemy? Big deal. But our expectations have been lowered so much through this programming in the West, through this entrainment and education in the West, that it is difficult for us to see ourselves as warriors, as spiritual cosmic warriors whose time has come to take what is ours. And again, it shows a lot of our I thought the movie was valuable and very telling, because a lot of the people reacted negatively to Killmonger. Well, that's only saying that you are not ready for what is coming. The good news is it's time to get ready. All right? So we're going to take a 5-minute break here. And then when we come back, we're going to close this thing in about an hour or so. All right? And before we do that, any questions, any comments thus far? All right, getting started on the second half of this, decoding the Black Panther myth and movie. And we've already identified the two main characters of T'Challa and Killmonger, what they represent. Killmonger represents the Eastern man, or I'm sorry, T'Challa rather represents the Eastern man, or Osiris in the East, and Killmonger represents the Western man, or Osiris in the West. And as we go through the various comic book and sci-fi mythologies, you are going to see this representation of the Eastern man or Eastern Osiris and Western Osiris very graphically represented in movies. One in particular, the Jamie Foxx Django Unchained. Django Unchained. And we're going to decode that later on. And again, you're going to see that this is a major theme that underlies these heroic epics, superhero sci-fi movies as well. So, want to take a quick look at, I've been using the term myth and allegory. We want to take a quick look at these and then move on back to our decoding of the Black Panther myth and the movie. A myth is defined as a traditional story, especially one concerning the early history of a people, and specifically the early history of our people, explaining some natural or social phenomena and typically involving supernatural or miraculous beings or events. These supernatural beings and events represent our ancient ancestors who were fully or partially activated or illuminated or enlightened, fully charged. The most ancient myths represent these fantastic, miraculous, supernatural stories and caricatures, which were our fully activated ancestors, the gods of this planet. And that energy is returning to activate us. But again, we must be calibrated. We must be aligned to the proper energy. An allegory is the expression by means of symbolic fictional characters and actions of truths or generalizations about human existence. So we're taking a look at myth and allegory. The important thing for us to understand is this term monomyth, because this is what all of these scientific horror films, horror tales, superhero tales, they're based on an archetypal myth. And again, the main myth that they're based on is the Osirian myth. The Osirian myth. That is Osiris, Set, Isis, and Heru. Heru, Osiris's son, is where we get the term hero from. So any tale of a hero is based on this monomyth of Osiris. It's an archetypical myth, a theme that underlies a number of superficially different myths. And again, the only difference between these different horror stories and sci-fi stories and superhero stories and mythical tales, the differences are superficial. So it's up to us to syncretize these stories and get an understanding of it. And again, not everyone that uh, saw the Black Panther movie understood the roots from whence it arose. And these are all of these, various um, myths are based on one archetypical myth or one template, which again is the story or the tale of Osiris. In narratology and comparative mythology, the monomyth or the hero's or Heru's journey is the common template of a broad category of tales that involve a hero who goes on an adventure and in a decisive crisis wins a victory and then comes home changed or transformed. Now, we saw the first part of this hero who went on an adventure. We didn't recognize him, but it was Killmonger. But for some strange reason, and not a strange reason at all, as we'll see, he won the decisive victory, didn't he? Didn't he win the throne, defeat T'Challa for the throne? But for some reason, he was not allowed to come home, changed and transformed. He was killed off before that could happen. So we know right away that there's some funny business going on. And we're going to pinpoint and put our finger on exactly what that funny business was and is as it relates to the Black Panther myth and the movie. To syncretize means to attempt to unite and harmonize, again, these different tales, these different broad categories of tales that are what? Superficially different. The individual in the West that is responsible for changing or altering the monomyth that underlie these mythic tales was an individual called H.P. Lovecraft. And today we won't go into the specifics of how he did this. We're just going to look and take a brief glimpse of the man and to identify him as the individual that set the template for tales such as the Black Panther movie. All right. And again, he is responsible for altering the archetypal myth. And it's going to explain very clearly and very succinctly why the actual hero of the movie, which is Killmonger, who was cast as a villain, is going to explain why he was cast as a villain who goes on an adventure both in America and then back to his homeland, wins a decisive victory, but then is never allowed to transform and come back home. They are performing what is called a reverse ritual. All right? And we're going to be very familiar with this term. And now, taking a look at H.P. Lovecraft, and I quote, "Now all of my tales are based on the fundamental premise that common human laws and interests and emotions have no validity or significance in the vast cosmos at large." This is the number one mistake that people make in decoding the Black Panther movie. You know why? It's because they drag common human laws and interests and emotions into the film. And that is what they use to judge Killmonger in the flick. But the individual that established the modern day template for comics and heroic narratives and films and stories and tales, mythological tales in the West, says that it is a mistake to add to our decoding process what? Common human laws, interests, and emotions, because he's letting you know they have no validity. So a lot of religious minded people left the movie thinking, well, I can't cheer. I kind of like Killmonger and I like some of the things he said, but I can't cheer for him, and I have to make him the village. Why? Because he violated common human laws and interests and emotions. But H.P. Lovecraft said they have no validity or significance. To me, there is nothing but puerility in a tale in which the human form and the local human passions and conditions and standards are depicted as native to other worlds or other universes. To achieve the essence of real externality, whether of time or space or dimension. Now understand, Wakanda was in another time. It was in an entirely different universe. One must forget that such things as organic life, good and evil, love and hate, and all such local attributes of a negligible and temporary race called mankind have any existence at all. You can't carry that with you into the film. Only the human scenes and characters must have human qualities. We know that both T'Challa and Killmonger were representations of superhuman heroes, two aspects of superhuman heroes. One, a dark aspect or a hidden aspect, and the other, a light aspect or revealed aspect. These must be handled with unsparing realism. Let me ask you, who was the realest character in the film besides Killmonger? So he is following perfectly the template that has been set down. These things must be handled with unsparing realism, not with catch-penny romanticism. But when we cross the line into the boundless and hideous unknown, now when he talks about the boundless rather, and hideous unknown, the shadow haunted inside, he is talking about the neuromelanin inside of you that gives you what? Supernatural, superhuman powers. You will have the powers of the cosmos at bay. They are terrified. Again, they are not scared at all. They are not affected with you marching and protesting and boycotting. It doesn't affect them at all in the least. They definitely want you to pick up a weapon because that is what they are experts at. They are aberrant, demented killers. They don't mind that. What they are terrified at is you uncovering that hidden power that they call hideous in you. C.S. Lewis, one of the most well-known Christian authors of science fiction and mythology, has a book called The Hideous Strength, which is referring to this innate power of melanin that is inside of you, this magical power. They call it that hideous strength, that unspeakable power. And they have to demonize it. They have to villainize it. Exactly what they did in Killmonger, and the vast majority of us fell for it. Why? Because we took our programmed understanding of organic life, good and evil, love and hate, emotions, common human laws and interests, took them right there in the movies with us and didn't recognize our own shadow self, our own reflection as it was displayed there before us in the movie. So this is H.P. Lovecraft, and you're going to see that he had no love at all for us on the subject, the creation of niggers. In his words, when long ago the gods created earth, in Jove's fair image man was shaped at birth. This is a little poem that he wrote. The beasts for lesser parts were next designed, yet were they too remote from humankind. To fill the gap and join the rest of man, the Olympian host conceived a clever plan. A beast they wrought, a semi-human figure, filled it with vice, and called the thing a nigger. This is the individual that sets the template that everyone goes to. If you have to be a writer, if you're going to be a writer, and especially a screenwriter, you must worship at the temple of H.P. Lovecraft. And follow the template that he has established for these types of movies, which what? Are representations of actual individuals that existed in history. A myth concerns the early history of a people and the early history of our people. So the template was changed to make villains and demons and monsters of our ancient ancestors and their supernatural, fully activated abilities. We clear on this?
Right.
Everyone clear? All right. So many people walked into that movie again, not armed with knowledge, and they made an emotional and a moralistic judgment, and they were actually judging their own image, their own, again, shadow self, hidden self, as well as their ancestors. So we got to get this straight, family. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. How long, ye simple ones, referring to simple-minded individuals, will these individuals love simplicity, naivete, gullibility, and the scorners delight in their scorning, and fools hate knowledge. We can't be like that. We have to arm ourselves with knowledge and with knowledge of the truth. Proverbs 1, 7 and 22. We're going to start right at the basis. Again, we have taken a look at the individual that is responsible for setting the template universally for mythical tales and themes, which was the actual history of our ancestors, and how that template is biased and is racist to a profound degree. So let's look at cartoon and cartoon animation. Cartoon just means a drawing or a sketch on heavy paper or pasteboard. And we're going to look and see how that corresponds to stereotype, which is a method of printing from a plate, and also an image perpetuated with change, without change rather. So we're going to take a look at stereotypes in cartoons. And many of these images, some of us are old enough to remember, all right? But many of the things were banned or put underground. In the Zap comics, they had a stereotypical image of a character called Angel Food McSpade. And she was a particular type of stereotype. And the balloons say here that she's psychedelic. She's all heart, and she's saying the rest of me ain't bad either. So this is a highly sexualized version of the divine feminine. And if we understand the true, valid history of photography in the West, when the camera was made, the first subject was of black women in various stages of nudity or undress. Stereotyping through cartoons. We're all familiar with the tale of Sarah Barton, the so-called Hottentot Venus. And so we won't need to go through that, but these are the various images that were put on display, not only in print, but in actual live, real-time presentation of the Hottentot Venus. And again, most of us are familiar with that tale. How many people know that Merry Melodies, the Bugs Bunny and Elmer Fudd, that series, that they had another series called Coal Black and the Seven Dwarfs, full of the stereotypical images. So when someone says to me, "Oh man, that's just a cartoon," I laugh at the ignorance, because that is someone with no idea of, first of all, the power of images and the power of stereotypes, and no earthly idea of their own history. We think that stereotypes are a thing of the past, but they are not. And the same stereotypes are perpetuated without failure in all of today's movies, all of today's comics, but it has gotten a lot more sophisticated. But if you look, you'll still see it. There are 11 basic stereotypic black caricatures. There are 11 basic stereotypic black caricatures. The first one being the brute. And we're going to focus on this because this was the stereotype of that was used to caricaturize Killmonger in the Black Panther. He represented the brute. And we're going to see that we are preconditioned to not only dislike the brute, but to fear him. All right? To fear him. And this was done below our awareness for years. And it was done especially to our parents and grandparents, and subconsciously they transferred these stereotypic images to us. And again, unconscious ways. So the brute is the first. The second is the pickaninny, or the childlike stereotype. The third is the Tom, the Uncle Tom. The fourth is the nigger. The fifth is Sapphire, which Angel Food McSpade, as well as the Hottentot Venus, Sarah Barton, they cast them in terms of these stereotypes, where they showed them, again, in various stages of undressed, highly sexualized images. The Jezebel is like the Sapphire image. Again, the Mammy image, where we see here, which is perpetuated in modern day by Tyler Perry and the Medea series. Yeah, he's an agent. He's an agent. That's why he's making multi millions and almost billions of dollars. He's a billionaire because he is perpetuating and supporting the status quo. Again, you saw Martin Lawrence do it with Big Mama. And we've had a number of series through the 70s and the 60s and the 50s and the 40s, that portray the mammy image. The coon. All we got to do is look at all them pastors that supported Donald Trump, and athletes and politicians. We don't have to look very hard for the coons. They are being portrayed in real time. The tragic mulatto, the gollywog, and the gnat. We're going to concentrate on the brute character right now because, again, this is what Killmonger, that character, was cast in. The brute character portrays black man as innately savage, animalistic, destructive, and criminal. Was not that Killmonger? Did he not represent that? So again, this was an attempt so that we could not recognize him, that we would not identify too closely with that character. But that character, let me tell you, has the power to activate energy within you. Trust me on that. The brute caricature portrays black man as innately savage, animalistic, destructive, and criminal, deserving punishment and maybe death. So this is why, again, many of us were almost relieved when Killmonger was killed, when he was not allowed to do what the hero on the hero's adventure or the hero's journey was allowed to do. That is, go on an adventure, win a decisive victory, and then come back home changed and transformed. They did not allow him to do that. And they conditioned us, again, to almost be relieved that and to almost be pleased that he didn't do that. But he represents our victory, the energy that is within all of us that is going to allow us to achieve ultimately the victory against our oppressor. This brute is a fiend, a sociopath, an antisocial menace. Black brutes are depicted as hideous, terrifying predators who target helpless victims, especially white women. And we saw this. They didn't actually uh, allow that to play itself all the way out, but you saw it in his aggressive and menacing scene with the white woman in the museum, where he is looking at all of the ancient weapons, and then he starts to talk about, nah, y'all stole that from Wakanda, and I'm getting ready to take it off your hands. So they juxtaposed the black brute that we already knew was violent and antisocial and destructive and criminal against what? The white woman in the museum curator. So we see these stereotypes now being played out. Charles H. Smith in 1893, writing in the 1890s, claimed a bad Negro is the most horrible creature on the earth. The most brutal and merciless. You think that's an overstatement, or he understated it? Clifton R. Breckinridge, 1900, a contemporary of Smith's, said of the black race, when it produces a brute, he is the worst and most insatiate brute that exists in human form. So now you understand why they vilified Killmonger and how, and why, if you did, you had a conditioned, programmed, trained response to fear him like your enemies and oppressors fear him. So, during slavery, the dominant caricatures of blacks, the mammy, the coon, tom, and pickaninny, portrayed them as childlike, ignorant, docile, groveling, and in general harmless. And this, although T'Challa didn't have all of those abilities or those characteristics, he definitely, because he was juxtaposed, even as a king, with his younger sister, and they had childlike exchanges, little silly. It portrayed him as more childlike. He definitely wasn't ignorant, but he was sort of docile and generally harmless, although he had all of this immense power. These portrayals are pragmatic and instrumental. I'm going to say that again. These portrayals are pragmatic and instrumental. By the way, this information comes from, and I didn't mention it, it comes from the Jim Crow Museum at Ferris State University. And you can just, it is a tremendous expose and treatise on black stereotypes throughout history online. So you can just Google the museum, the Jim Crow Museum, and it'll come up and you'll go right to their website, and it's full of this type of information. And I'll make sure that I put this in the notes next time and give them credit. Proponents of slavery created and promoted images of blacks that what? justified slavery, and soothed white consciousnesses. I mean, this is exactly what happened and occurred in Black Panther. And instead of justifying slavery, they justified further oppression of blacks by their treatment of Killmonger. If slaves were childlike, for example, then a paternalistic institution where masters acted as quasi-parents of their slaves was humane, even morally right. More importantly, slaves were rarely depicted as brutes. Listen, because they understand the energetic aspect of these images and of these portrayals and of these uh, stereotypes. They are rituals. They are very powerful rituals. Again, very powerful juju, very powerful medicine, very powerful alchemical symbols and cosmic symbols. More importantly, slaves were rarely depicted as brutes. Why? Because the portrayal might have some self-fulfilling prophecy. Do you think that they were superstitious and silly? Or do you think that they knew the power of our metaphysics and the power of black magic and the power of that the symbols have on our subconscious? That these symbols, like I've been saying from the beginning, correspond to energies that are already in you. And seeing a warrior like Killmonger succeed in completing the hero's journey would activate something within you and in us that would what? Threaten their existence. They know this. Killmonger is portrayed as a brute again, and definitely has a clear and verifiable prophetic significance. This is what we are proving chapter and verse in this series. During the Radical Reconstruction period, 1867 to 1877, many white writers argued that without slavery, which supposedly suppressed their animalistic tendencies, blacks were reverting to criminal savagery. The belief that the newly emancipated blacks were a black peril continued into the early 1900s. Follow these timelines now. Writers like novelist Thomas Nelson Page lamented that the slavery era good old darkies had been replaced by the new issue, blacks born after slavery, whom he described as lazy, thriftless, intemperate, insolent, dishonest, and look, without the most rudimentary aspects of morality. So that is what is scary to them. And again, our ancient ancestors, and they know this, have no concerns about morality or your moral programming and indoctrination. They could care less about that. They are emerging, those energies are emerging for one thing, and that is to destroy the status quo and to end this age. Listen, by any means necessary. We must realize this and put this moralistic programming and training on pause and on hold. Because if not, we will not align ourselves correctly to the energy that is predominant at this particular period of time. So again, we talk about cartooning as being literally drawing or sketching on heavy paper and pasteboard. The next aspect was stereotyping in the print age, a method of printing images from a plate. And it also has a secondary meaning of an image perpetuated without change. And we have seen that these images that were created and constructed meticulously years ago, that they are being perpetuated even to this day. And understand, they are being perpetuated universally now in the most popular movie of this era. So when people again tell me, oh man, it's just a cartoon, yeah, I just kind of laugh. So a stereotype is something conforming to a fixed and general pattern. And again, if we look closely enough in commercials, in the print media, in cartoons, even today, we see these same stereotypical images fixed and conforming to this general pattern that was established. A synonym for stereotype is ritual. And again, you'll hear me talking about rituals or reverse rituals. These are very powerful things. We had talked about the power rather of ritual scarification and branding, and the healing aspect of that. Rituals carry dynamic power within them. And when we know how to use a ritual, and we know how to recognize a reverse ritual, we have the power of turning these rituals around, these stereotypical rituals around, and exacting the power, or extracting the power rather, of a box office movie that is garnering so much attention now, and flip the script on these individuals. Correctly decode the movie, correctly identify the heroes, and then tap into that power. Tap into that power that is being generated. So a ritual is a formula. This is an alchemical formula, like we said, a metaphysical formula, a cosmic formula or pattern. And again, it is connected with the word stereotype. An animated cartoon becomes even more powerful because you just don't have one image, you have a series of images. And in the stills, as we're going to see, they can put subliminal messages and adversely affect our subconscious. And there's no doubt that they do this in all movies. An animated cartoon is a film from the cinema, television, or computer screen, which is made using sequential drawings, types, cartoons, images, as opposed to animations in general, which include films made using clay, puppet, and other means. Animated cartoons are still created for commercial, educational, and personal purposes. So, I mean, they use this to train you, educational purposes, to program you. So we cannot, just because it's a cartoon like that, we cannot ignore it, and we cannot ignore and discount the power that is inherent in these things. I'm going to emphasize it again. It is very powerful. It just looks like entertainment. A lot of people are familiar with the Bart Simpson cartoons and how prophetic they are. And you see from a episode called The New York versus Homer Simpson in 1997, you see someone holding up a paper that says New York $9, but it's actually saying 9/11, and he's holding up money, and you see the Twin Towers in the background. And we know that 9/11 did not happen in 1997. This movie predicted Donald Trump being elected president, and they are famous for their predictions. There are dozens of them. But we want to say, a lot of people don't believe it. They say it's just a cartoon. We look at the movie Aladdin. At the beginning of the movie, Aladdin is dark-skinned and poor. At the end of the movie, he is light-skinned and rich. Think that's sending a message? And at the end here, we see the subtle sexual images that Disney uses in a vast majority of their comics. And you see the image of a phallus or a penis being represented by apparently the dress that Minnie Mouse is wearing. And there are many examples. And I mean, you can go to YouTube and see the actual artist drawing, starting out with a sexualized image or a symbol, and then making a cartoon out of it. And you don't see it with your immediate awareness, but it speaks to the your subconscious, and most importantly, the subconscious of your children. Subliminal suggestion occurs when messages or ideas that are perceived below the threshold or limen rather of conscious awareness influence thoughts, feelings, and actions. So this is very, very important that we understand it's not just a cartoon. We had mentioned the ancestors, that they were represented in what? These myths. And that these myths these ancient myths that have been turned into modern myths of superheroes and horror and terror figures, that they are representations of our ancient ancestors, called by H.P. Lovecraft the Great Old Ones. Does someone have a question or something to add? Okay. So our ancient ancestors, when H.P. Lovecraft created these characters called the Great Old Ones, and you all know he was a racist, a vehement racist. He was talking about our ancient ancestors. I'm going to prove it. Now, this is from a book called The Two Babylons, and I'm going to connect it with the great old ones and our ancient ancestors. The reason of the double representation of the God I cannot enter into, but it must be evidence from the words of Virgil, already quoted, that the figures having their heads encircled, look, the figures having their heads encircled with rays represent the fire god or sun deity. All right. Now we already talked about Jesus being the Osiris in the east, being the representation of the sun that rises in the east and sets in the west. So this is connecting this with this treatise on fire gods or sun divinities, sun deities. And what is worthy of special note, that these fire gods are black. Well, what does he mean? Well, he's going to say the color thereby identifying them with the Ethiopian or the black Phaethon or Python. We get the word Python from the word Phaethon, which is talking about these serpent beings, or the Naga, the Anunnaki, the Naga, the Negus, the Negus, the niggers. While, as the author Pompey himself admits, these same black fire gods are represented by two huge serpents. So when the fire god is represented in the movie, who do they get to play the fire god? With the two huge serpents coming out of his helmet. Well, it's the same person that they get to do the voice of Darth Vader in Luke Skywalker, that says, I am your father. But we see that as just a sci-fi movie and not represented as a statement of fact and truth, that the black man, the fire gods, are the fathers of everything in this earth realm, and especially the aberrant man, the Caucasoid. And even in the Conan Barbarian series, he was not actually the father like that of Conan from a genetic sense, but he was actually the spiritual father of Conan that was responsible for Conan's great strength. And again, mirroring and reflecting what is actual history. The actual history as us being the creators and therefore the father of the Caucasoid. They know our history, but by and large we don't know. When we see it on the screen, we do not recognize it. Why? Because we say, well, it's just a sci-fi movie. It's just a mythological thing about superheroes, and we're ignorant of the fact that that is our actual history. That is, the superheroes, mythical characters, are our ancient ancestors, the great old ones, as H.P. Lovecraft talks to them. The character in Conan was Thoth Amon, also, well, it's spelled the same way, is a fictional character created by Robert E. Howard. He is an evil wizard, in other words, a black man that is a brute, that has these control of his black magical or melaninated powers, internal melaninated powers. In the Phoenix on the Sword, the first of the Conan the Cimmerian stories, he is often used as Conan's arch enemy in derivative works, but the two characters never met in any of Howard's original stories. You have to know that this template is being followed very closely. If not in the books, they're going to make sure that you see it, what? in moving pictures so that it makes a more powerful impact on your mind from a subconscious state. Howard most likely derived the character's name from the Egyptian deities Thoth and Amun. Thoth and Amun was the foremost sorcerer of the Stygian culture. Now, again, you're going to find out that the Stygians are black, which Howard set up as what? The ancestors of the ancient Egyptian civilization. So again, they know I made the statement that the great old ones are our ancient ancestors. Well, if you need a white man to tell you, he just did. Thoth Amon was a worshiper of a god referred to as Father Set. Now, the name Set places it squarely into the Osiris, Set, Isis, and Heru ancient myth. While this must derive from, again, the Egyptian deity Set, excuse me, Howard transforms him into a serpent god. Again, and here begins the reverse ritual that is always present. There is some intimation that Father Set may be one of the great old ones that H.P. Lovecraft created. We know that this is no doubt, and that when H.P. Lovecraft, a racist, created these demonic beings, these satanic beings called the Great Old Ones, with their hideous power and satanic, magical, demonic powers, that he was talking about black folks. There's no doubt. Howard and Lovecraft were friends. Oh, imagine that. And correspondents who often drew inspiration from one another's work. In his first and only appearance, Howard describes Thoth as a somber giant whose dusky skin revealed his Stygian blood. They're talking about our ancestors. And again, we have recent ancestors. I want to make this point as we close. We have ancestors that are more recent, that look like us, that come from the same basic earth plane that we did, that have the same form. But the ancient ancestors are something a little different. They are the gods of the earth in mythology, individuals with unspeakable power that were able to demonstrate this power at will. The great old ones, an ongoing theme in H.P. Lovecraft's work, is the complete irrelevance of mankind in the face of cosmic horrors that apparently exist in the universe. And these cosmic horrors, again, represent our ancient ancestors. That they knew, H.P. Lovecraft knew that they would rise again at the end of time. And like the rest of these individuals, understand that their rising and their ascension mark the end of their dominion and oppression. That they are these cosmic horrors that apparently exist in the universe, with Lovecraft constantly referring to the great old ones, which is a loose pantheon of ancient powerful deities from space who what? Once ruled the earth and who have since fallen into a death-like sleep. I'll just let y'all interpret who in the world he's talking about. He's talking about us and our ancestors. So, the individuals that are responsible for writing these fantastic, heroic tales are completely aware of the fact that they are writing tales about our ancestors, our ancient ancestors, and the coming of this cosmic occult power that is resident in all of us, that is innate and dormant in all of us. And the reason why they are so terrified and that they characterize these individuals in such uh, uh, negative and demonic and villainous terms is because, again, they know that once we understand and figure out who it is that they're talking about, and then understand the prophetic timeline and where we are at in the prophetic timeline, according to this prophetic blueprint that we talked about at the beginning, they know that that marks the end of their age of domination. So we've come uh, back to where we started, full circle. So we're going to end the recording right here and ask if there are any questions and or comments.